Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Mark from Solar Games, and today we're on a new camera setup. And there's all this wide angle stuff, We're also shooting 60 FPS on 1080p. Let's see how that goes. Maybe I'll shoot 4K so you guys can see all the pores on my spores. That's crazy. Pores on my face, but we'll see. Probably unnecessary. My friends are always telling me like just 30 FPS, 1080p is fine. I believe it. Plus, it'll be better for your internet, right? So today we're going to talk about a topic that is very near and dear to me because I love the economics of trading card games. And today we're going to talk about Grand Archive. So the topic I'm going to talk about is the changes to first edition in Alchemical Revolutions. Now, it's something that I do want to talk about because I think there is a lot of confusion out there, especially with the product sheet out there and how it's kind of written. At least when I initially read it, I definitely read it differently than how it was explained later through many Discord conversations. But again, like most people don't see and read everything on Discord. It's also just not a great way to share that information. So I hope to use this video for that. So this is like about, I think 2 Sundays ago, there was a discussion on the whole ALC first edition and alter situation. Of course, this is here spearheaded by like I think Mitch and gosh, I don't remember the other person that was there, but very actively voicing their opinions and thoughts and concerns, which I think is great, right? But basically, look, a lot of people were just trying to find out like what's happening. And the core of this discussion started with this whole like first edition foils, especially, will not have the first edition print on them. So if you remember in Dawn of Ash, all the cards inside Dawn of Ash First Edition, the Kickstarter First Edition boxes, they say First Edition on the bottom, whereas the Alter Edition later says Dawn of Ash or DOA Alter, right? Versus DOA 1E. Now, there's, of course, unique artwork, all that stuff that also would help you identify which version you're kind of the card's coming from, but that isn't on every single card. So effectively the only way, for example, if you were to tell the difference between a Tactful Sergeant from First Edition versus a Tactful Sergeant in Alter is to look at the bottom of the card. Now, under like normal circumstances for non-premium versions of the card, the pricing really doesn't matter that much. In fact, I've seen First Edition sometimes being lower than actual Alter. I don't know why that is. But aside from that, though, the foiling does matter, right? So the foil first ed in general is always a little bit higher, much higher, I would say, than the alter foil. And this is what caused all the controversy around ALC. Now, as some of you guys know, FTC, Fractured Crown, the expansion set, I don't even want to call it the main set, of Grand Archive did not have any first edition or alter edition. It was just FTC, right? I actually like that perspective better because I feel like a lot of card games kind of like lost their way with this thing where they're doing first edition, collector's edition, all sorts of different edition. Rather just having one edition, it's the game, you buy this one box, that's what it is. I like that better, but of course, games are still kind of figuring this out. A lot of different games are working on different paths and trying to see which one's more profitable for them in the long term. I think Grand Archive is also figuring out what actually works because behind the scene production, making the actual cards, how it kind of works out is a little bit different, right? So here's some facts that we should just kind of lay down the foundation for our conversation. Number one, there might not be an actual alter at all. So I don't know how many of you guys realize this. When I read the product sheet at first, the way that it reads, especially in the section about alter, it definitely reads to me like there's an alter already planned that's going to be released and describing like how it's going to be. Now, that's apparently now no longer actually in effect, right? Sildar's perspective on the alter now is if there's going to be an alter edition, there's going to be many, many different new cards, right? So in that paragraph, it talks about mechanically different unique cards. What he's now saying is there's not going to just be like one or two or a couple. We're talking like 50 or more. Like at least 50 is the kind of like stuff that he said on Discord. Now, again, I would take all that stuff with a grain of salt. It's just Sildar kind of voicing his opinion. He of course, he has a big, perspective or say in how this works, but he's not the only person to decide that kind of stuff too, right? And again, small company, things still could change as they move forward. So it's not a guarantee that this is the way it's going to be forever. Yeah, so the way you should think about alters now going forward is that it's going to be more like a remaster set or a remake, if you will. So if you're familiar with Magic, Magic recently has been doing something called remastered. This whole idea of like, let's take a set from a way back, like let's say 20 years ago, and take 3 different sets of cards, put them all together, and then, like re-release it into one set. And you can draft it. It's a very cool experience to have, kind of very similar to playing back in 20 years ago, but taking out some of the cards that were just not good. It's almost like a redesign, right? So there's a lot of effort put into there to make it feel good again. That's how an Ultra should feel like, at least from the way that Sildar is describing it to me. Again, I'm not 100% sure what that looks like for Grand Archive either, because Grand Archive does not have a limited experience. And if you're just opening the cards to, I guess, get new cards, effectively, until there's a limited format where that would matter, it does feel like just another expansion set, but with reprints is how it feels, right? So that's kind of how I think about it. I'm not really sure if there will actually be Alter, like will there be Alchemical Revolutions Alter, or something like Grand Archive 2024 reprints type of, like all the products in 2024, the cards that we see that should be reprinted for professional or competitive play, put together in a box. Who knows what that product looks like? I have no clue, right? And if they're putting new cards in it, effectively it's a new set. I don't really need to, highlight that any more than what it is already. Now, the second part is, and this is pretty important, I think this one is actually a lot more clear. There is no first edition logo or indicator for any of the cards except CSR. So originally we had this thought of like, well, there are going to be some unique foils in the first edition of Alchemical Revolutions that has a stamp that says ALC 1 first edition. That's what we thought it would be, right? For the unique foils, meaning these foils don't exist in an Ultra edition later. They're not going to be reprinted. But apparently now there is they're not going to have the 1E stamp. So they're technically limited in their print run, but they're not actually different from the look of the card. It's a little bit confusing. I think all you have to think about is it's giving, like, I guess, collectors a little bit more work to think through things like, oh, okay, this card is from ALC First Ed. It's a foil, right? It's the only place you can get the foil, but it's not indicative of that, because you could, for example, have a later set that just also says ALC, may even have the same card, but you keep opening boxes, but there's no foil version of that card. It's a little bit confusing, but again, I understand probably why they're doing it, because again, every single time you make a new card, you have to have a printing plate, and those plates do cost money. And so every time you make a modification on the plate to just print different cards that are slightly different, it's a non-trivial amount of money that they have to spend to do this, right? So the least amount of like additions and changes, the better. And adding a layer of foiling, again, I'm not 100% sure, so I need to ask Roger this again, but I'm not 100% sure on how the foiling is done, but in a lot of other games, the foiling is a second layer later, so it doesn't change the base plate. You can still print the card on the base plate and then add the foil layer later, so that's, you don't have to have a separate base plate if you're printing foils, essentially. So that's probably why they do it. Now, the really key part is the CSRs will still say first edition on them as an indicator. So the exclusive CSRs to ALC first edition are still going to say first edition on the card itself. Again, I don't really like this. It is a little bit confusing. I'd rather honestly we have ALC and then never have another set that's called ALC, right? You can print the card again, but just call it from a different set. Like a lot of card games do this. You can reprint the cards. They're from a different set. They may even have a different set symbol, and it's totally fine, right? You don't have to call it ALC. You can even have a different artwork for it, but it has the same text and it works the same way, and I think that's totally okay too. Yeah, so that's it. Like basically, the product sheet overall, in my opinion, is very confusing to this fact of like all the things I've been kind of saying. Now, my thinking is the product sheet was finalized a long time ago, before some of these discussions, ideas, opinions shifted and changed, which is what's causing some of this like confusion and honestly the product sheet being out of date to what's actually happening. Now that we have all the facts, let's start the discussion part of this video a little bit. So one of the problems I see with this is that, look, if we have a product, right, that is essentially first edition, but there's always like a threat that the first edition is not going to be the final product, that we may have a product in the future. Because again, right now, the way it's looking is that we're going to print ALC, and there may never be an Alchemical Revolution set ever again, right? There might not be an Alter at all. And even if there is one, effectively, it's not even the same thing. I don't even know why they would call it the same thing if it has more than 50 cards that are different, right, in a set of, let's say, 300 cards. So that feels a little bit weird to me. But the fact that there is no first edition, the fact that there's no like definitive way to say, hey, this is from a set that was printed and never printed again, I don't know why there is even an argument around that. I think long term, though, I do think maybe that's what Grand Archive is going to do, is that right now we're kind of in this transition phase of figuring things out. a lot of people are still kind of like, has memory of what has happened in the past and using that to judge what is likely to happen in the future. Meaning Dawn of Ash had first edition and Alter, so we're thinking like, okay, well, ALC will have also first edition and Alter, and you have expectations about how that works out, altogether. Again, like, for those that kind of are like super against reprints, just understand in other card games, almost every single TCG, there are reprints all the time. This happens in Magic, this happens in Pokemon, this happens in every single TCG, right? Sometimes the reprints don't matter because, like in cases of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, a lot of the reprints are power crept out anyways, meaning if I reprint the card, you only want it as for a collector purpose. You don't actually care about the card itself because it's not as good or powerful compared to other cards that you can have, right? So really there's no point in that reprint after that point, okay? Yeah, but I think the problem, of course, is the fact that there is this like original 1E population kind of idea, right? So the way that other card games deal with reprints is they're going to have reprints, but those reprints essentially are of a different set. And so the set symbol might be different, the set itself is different. So essentially that first print run, well, we won't call it first 1E because that's confusing, but the first time this card was reprinted at all, it's still maintained. That population of maybe even the original artwork, the original frame, the original number of cards printed from that set is maintained. So a good example of this, it would be like Black Lotus, right? So you have Black Lotus from Alpha, from Magic's first set Alpha or Beta or Unlimited. And that's after that, Black Lotus was never reprinted again, right? So from Alpha to Beta to Unlimited are 3 Black Lotuses that have different, like basically the card is actually different, right? Alpha has a very unique corner on the card. Beta has a unique corner as well. It's different from Alpha, but it's also different from every other card, Magic card. Then Unlimited has the very unique, iconic white border, but also the very deep coloring in this card itself. So these are differences, right? So of course the population of those cards in each one of those sets are maintained. The reprinting of Unlimited only added more Black Lotuses into the pool of all Lotuses, but it never like basically took down the number from Alpha, meaning Alpha still had a little bit over 1,000 Black Lotuses, and that's all that there ever will be in the world, right? Because, well, I guess there's always a chance Wizards goes out there and reprints a bunch of Black Lotus secretly or whatever. But, other than the fakes, other than like an actual reprint from the company itself, the 1,000 is maintained, 1,000-ish is maintained and maintained forever. Okay, so the second part that I want to talk about as a problem is confusion, right? So one of the things that I talked to a lot of stores and owners and things like that. One of the things that people hate, and this is happening in other card games like Magic, is if I type a card in, there's like 17,000 versions of that card. Which one do I list? I mean, if you are an avid player, okay, this is a command tower from this commander set with this symbol, blah, blah, blah. It's really easy. Most stores don't know that. Most store owners may not know that either. Their employees definitely don't know this. So it's very confusing. Now, one of the problems, of course, with Grand Archive is that, like, stores in this case also don't know if they have a card, which set it's from. If it just says ALC and it's a foil, do they just say, oh, it's a normal ALC foil? Do they know this is an exclusive foil that will not be reprinted later? It's not clear, right? Because again, in the original announcement, it sounds like there are going to be foils that are in this ALC that are not going to be in the reprint if it does happen later. So that makes it a little bit confusing, and you can imagine some stores going to have issues with pricing and listing and all that stuff. So I don't like that. In addition to this confusing is that like 3 different sets have released 3 different expectations for what they are going to be. Now, Dawn of Ash had first edition Kickstarter boxes, but also had the alters, not including things like Prelude and all that stuff. We won't talk about those, but alter and first edition is more massively available to people. FTC does not have first edition at all. It's just one set, one and done. Now ALC, there is a first edition box, at least they're called this way, which sounds kind of crazy. I don't know why they didn't just go with the FTC way to say it's ALC. There's no first edition, there's no alter, no like subtext to it. If the plan is to kind of kill this whole first edition release wave, then the alter release wave later idea altogether. Just have ALC, and then you can effectively reprint it for as long as the set is in print, right? And then once that's done, then just cut it off. That would probably be the right way to do it going forward. And I think Grand Archive is trying to move towards that, but it's a transition period. It's a small company. I think they're still working things out. They don't want to rock the boat too much, but in this weird transition phase, it's causing a lot of confusion for players, right? And so that to me is like, that to me is a little confusing. And look, other card games like Flesh and Blood is a good example here. Tried this whole first edition unlimited thing, and they kind of screwed it up because they started printing a lot more first edition. And look, it's not even a money thing for them. Honestly, they just want to get more cards available for the players because usually the unlimited comes like a month after. Remember, the factory that's printing these cards can only basically print one set at a time. And it's called first edition, so it wants to be first to market. So they print the first ad, ship it, get it ready, all the distributors send it out. Then the unlimited comes. But you can see if the cards are legal and there's like a month difference and some people can't get the cards, it's a really bad feeling. So Flesh and Blood try to solve this problem by front loading a lot more first edition boxes. And the shady part was not telling everyone about it, or at least their distribution network didn't tell everyone about it. And so it caused a lot of like different like pricing asymmetry of information. People were buying first edition thinking it's very scarce when it was very available, right? That's their problem. Fab then basically essentially done away with first ed altogether. Starting with like Monarch was the first set that they way overprinted, but of Tales of Aria, Everfest were all had first edition and I guess effectively unlimited, but those boxes in some ways are now more rare than the first ed because they kind of were printed a little bit and then just stopped because the whole idea, like there was too much first ed in the market, it doesn't work. I think Grand Archive probably knows this, the designers of it anyways. I hope Sildar knows this and Alan and those folks. And I think they should learn from it and really think about whether it's good or healthy for your game to have a first ed alter at all. Maybe don't even call it first ed, just call it Alchemical Revolutions. Honestly, this is one of the few things I think Wizards of the Coast does pretty well, right? They just release the product and it's available for everyone and there's only one edition essentially. Now there's, booster, different types of boxes, but again, just the cards are of the same set. The last thing also is like foil values would tank. I think Mitch talked about this too, which I agree. If the foils have any threat of being reprinted, the fact that it's at least confusing whether this is a foil from first ed or not, whether it has like a fixed population or not, if these things are not crystal clear, the value for them will tank, which means that there's going to be less people ripping boxes for these foils, collecting full sets. And you can judge whether that's a good thing or not for yourself, but I think overall for the health of the game, you want the collectors to be ripping packs for the premium cards, CSRs, foils, etc., and then selling the actual normal cards into the market, pushing that price down for all the players, right? That's the intent of Grand Archive, this whole 50-50 split of collectors and players. So you can't really piss off the collectors. In my opinion, you should kind of cater to both, and I think having some sort of like, I don't know, bottom for the collectors would be good. Not every collector is going to be opening 40, 50 cases or 40, 50 boxes of Grand Archive to chase after CSRs. So, and if they want to put their money into like foils, that's kind of now starting to disappear because it's not clear, as an indicator versus like Dawn of Ash First Edition that these are limited runs, these are exclusive, etc. So having some sort of indicator for that would be, I think, better. And and in general, like I think, like average collectors, average player, just won't care at all, right? This is going to happen. They may just kind of like not even notice this, and by year 2, we're going to be kind of through this thing, and then it won't matter too much, right? So lastly on this video, let's talk about moving forward. So moving forward, I think there's a couple things that I would like to see from Weebs, and again, this is just growing pains, but consistency, right? Let's have some consistency so stores, collectors, players, anybody, right, know what to expect. I'm not a big fan, like I said in the preamble to this video, that I hate information asymmetry. And I think having less confusion from the product line to the single cards, how the cards are kind of like framed, would be better, right? And honestly, it saves you money, like so you don't have to have different plates or whatever. I would argue why even have the CSRs be, with 1E? They should just say ALC. In the future, when you reprint these cards, right? Obviously, you're not reprinting the CSRs, but if you reprint any of the cards, just have a different logo, have a different symbol. There are infinite 3-letter symbols you can use. Magic has done this for, 30 years, and they haven't run out at all. So it's not a concern, right? Second thing is, and I'm sure, look, again, I'm making these from the outside, so I have no clue what's happening on the inside, but I would say spend lots of time to understand the release waves and the quantity and how that's being absorbed by the market rather than on different product versions and things like that, right? I trust that Grand Archive knows this data really well. They actually have really good data on regions, how each set sells, how different stores are picking up the product or dropping the product altogether, how the sell-through rate is working, right? They're getting that data from distribution, and distribution is getting that data from the stores themselves. So they know how well the game sells. They know how they can release the product so that it doesn't over flood the market and it doesn't undersupply the market. I would spend more time in making sure that like supply chain works really well. I know it's not perfect, it won't be perfect, but again, time spent on that will make all the players, collectors, everyone happier, in my opinion, rather than spending time on thinking things like, should we have a 1E or not have a 1E, right? And again, just let's prevent the FTC situation, right? Let's prevent it before it happens, I should say. I know the whole redemption thing is really good, and it's really good that like GA or Weeps acts it super fast to get it done. But look, trust that the market will kind of figure it out, and then you guys do the right thing based on the data you have. I think that's what would help us the most. Again, I know Weebs will adjust because they've shown this in the past, but really it's like what I expect from an agile company, a small company that's super agile, that can move the ship around as needed and adjust to the waves. And it's what I'm expecting them. They're small, they don't have a lot of politics, I'm hoping, and they care. They care about the community, they care about collectors, they care about people like me, right? And what I do and what I think. And that's really, really beautiful and it's really, really powerful because at the core, I am a big fan or a believer that the things that people say, the things that people do, most people will not remember in past whatever years. But how you make those people feel when you said those things, when you did those things, that's what lasts forever. And as long as Weebs continue to engage with the community, continue to like just work with us, understand our concerns, and actually make changes and make us continue to trust you as a creator, I think that's what really ultimately is going to help the game long term. Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, none of this stuff that I've spoken about has really made me lost trust in the company or anything like that. I fully trust the team. I've met them multiple times. These guys are genuine. They care about the game. And honestly, right now, it's not a profit motive for them. They're more interested in growing the game and building something beautiful. And I feel it. I see it. I feel it. And it's really hard because, you know, if you have never run a company, like even me doing a YouTube channel like this, oftentimes you'll literally have things like this. Somebody on here, this side says, hey, Mark, do this. Somebody on this says literally do the opposite. And you have people upvoting both sides. What do you do? You know, honestly, as a creator, you have to do what you believe, not what this person says, not what this person says. And I think that's what Weeps need to be doing too. My video is just more information and my discussion, my thoughts, my opinion on the situation. It really should not affect how they actually run their company. Now, I would love it if they consider my thoughts and opinions, but I don't think they need to make any adjustments based on what I'm saying, nor take 100% of what I'm saying and then make that reality. And I don't think they're going to do that, by the way. But that's the kind of things that I want to see from a company that I trust, right? And always out there trying to do the right thing, doing what they believe is good for the community. Anyways, long video for today, but this is what we do on Sunday. So Mark from SolarGames, you stay classy.